If you've missed anything, my book is The Tears of Ray, Beekeeping of Ancient Egypt. You can get it on Amazon, both as an ebook or in a hardback. But if you miss something, I mean, similar. The species in Nepal is a sister species of Apis mellifera. The species that was present in ancient Egypt was Apis mellifera scutularis. I found I've had the pleasure of sampling ancient Egyptian honey on many occasions, and it's just it's a little more slight molassesy flavor, but it's still it's our honey. It's what we're used to. I've not had a chance to taste from the honey from Apis dorsalis, which is the giant honeybee, but I have been down to Mexico. I'm working on another project on the stingless bees of the Maya, and it's basically what I'm doing with Egypt. I'm doing it for the Maya, and I have had a chance to sample their honey, and it's a very different flavor. And there are a number of people now creating a new industry of Mayan honey, so that's quite different. So asking a question that tastes different was a very good one, very astute. But I can't. I know that the ancient Egyptians had two classifications for honey. At Pabasa, when they're pouring the honey in, it was bright red, and the red honey was desert honey, and the typical yellow honey came more from the more lush areas up in the delta. And so they did classify two different kinds of honey. But the honey that we grow in parts of the West and in more arid areas tastes very similar to the honey we have here in the East.
All right. The next question I see asks why there are 4 pairs of legs in the pictures for the bees, but she thought that they only had 3 pairs.
Actually, let me go back to a slide here.
It was the very beginning, when you started showing us the bee.
Yeah, let me go back and bring this back up again here, and we can take us back to the very. Sorry, this is going to be kind of mesmerizing here, but we can do it.
There.
Okay, I went too far.
There.
That's hieratic. That's basically just almost like a quick doodle. It's not a formal representation of the bee. So we need to go to that cartouche to see the actual number here. And this one only shows 4 as well. In many of these instances, there would be the 5th and the 6th leg would actually come down along the base of the abdomen. There's a lot of variation. In fact, you see here on this slide here, you can see these all have 6 legs. You're looking at, so you see 3, the pairs are superimposed, but there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and here's 1, 2, 3, and here's your. Actually, yeah, you are seeing 3 legs, and there's a 4th one here. There's one on the other side, but they have the hind leg present here on these, as you'll find on many of these cases. But the carving of these things, and I have a chapter in the book where I talk about variation in the hieroglyphs. And so if you don't mind, I think I can show you this quickly. There was a lot of variation in how they carved this thing, and it was really tied into available space. You'll sometimes find these legs sort of bent down and the abdomen bent down because there we go. I'm not sure this is going to show, but we'll try. Okay, there's so you can see the variation of there we are. The variation in the shape. And some of them have the abdomen really short and truncated. Some have the wings in a V, like you see off my pinky there. And so the scribe, there was a scribe that actually draw in the bee. And if they were running out of space, they'd bend the abdomen further down. If they're running out of space with the forewing, they have the wings split like this.
So in other words, make it fit, because you only get one piece of paper.
That's right. And so they would draw that in, and then someone would come in and chisel it out.
Yeah. And, all right. The next one is, we know today how important bees are. No bees, no pollination, and eventually no planet. But back then, do you think that they knew that?
Well, they certainly were. Well, I don't. We if you want to over extrapolate that the Tears of Ray poem, that they worked the bee, the honey, that they certainly knew that bees were in the plants. When they were thinking about where wax was made, they were probably feeling the pollen balls, which are a little sticky. They were probably missing that out. But the ancient Egyptians were great horticulturalists. There's been a lot of work done on the plants that were produced, and there's wonderful examples of tens of these things, of gardens that were around, that were drawn on the wall of temples. And even in the afterlife, it's very lush. But they knew some things that I find kind of amazing. For example, they grew dates. Dates are pollinated by a wasp, but the wasp didn't occur there. So they knew how to apparently to scarify the flower to get it to produce a fruit. That's a rather elaborate. They worked with corms, they worked with seeds. They were clearly among the first really good horticulturalists.
So then the next question was about what type of trees were growing there at the time. And you just mentioned dates, that they had some other stuff. So some of those trees have been identified as what types of trees were growing.
Yes. Yeah, there are you can identify from some of the wood objects they're in, although like there's a lot of cedar brought in from Lebanon for the for wood products and structures. There's a database out there of the plants of ancient Egypt in several books that get into the kind of elaborate things they were growing. And there's a wonderful book called I can't see it from where I'm looking at it, but it's the offerings to the god, offerings in ancient Egypt. And there's a whole section in there on what plant matter was provided. They were growing wheat, barley. They were growing, they had dates, they had melons, they had a whole range of plants
and we do have plants. Several people interested in who the gardeners were, and this one person said that on the Neferhetep slide, which symbol was the person who kept the garden? So it's not enough to be a beekeeper, what you were looking for. She wants to know what the garden keeper was, the gardener.
They want a gardener to join the beekeeper, don't they?
Yes, they do, in several of these questions.
Well, I'm not going to have you watch this like a slide through these things, but let me see if I can find it for you here. I don't have I can't read the hieroglyph name very well for it, but I can. I'll take us back to that slide. And
Katie, can you zoom? Can you put it?
There we go. Now I can do it. So, my hieroglyph ability to read hieroglyphs is not that good. But we're looking at this guy here was a gardener. He's got a long so I don't have his name. I can certainly try to find it, but I don't have a name down here. It could be up here, but that individual is probably a gardener. Here's the guy that took it. He's got a bird, so he was hunting fowl. I know there's a horseman there as well, the stable man running the stables. But if they want to, if they would like to email me, I can send them the reference for this thing that has a diagnostic goes back to the late 1800s. I'm happy to send them a reference to Quibble's original book. I've been trying to find this actual artifact, but I can't find a location where it ended up. It probably is somewhere in the closets of the British Museum.
So there's lots of people who are really very grateful and thank you for all the wonderful information, and they're happy that you found a beekeeper name. So in their opinion, they wanted to know, they wanted to say that the names of non-governmental professionals got recorded. So they thought that was pretty cool.
That is true. There are a lot of other people. There's a series of books on some of the activities of women in ancient Egypt. One of my favorite, I don't remember her name offhand, but it's very likely that beekeeping in Egypt may have been a more male-dominated activity. However, and I have a reference to this individual in the in the book. However, there was a woman who essentially became the distributor of honey products, and probably hired a lot of beekeepers and sold their products in the marketplace.
The next one talked about it being so dry, it's desert. What other plants besides trees? You mentioned wheat. What other plants do you think that they would feed off of?
Oh, they had, you mean, the bees?
Yes.
There were a number of fruit trees. And of course, yes, it is dry. However, the Egyptians had an elaborate irrigation system. During the inundation, they would be able to distribute water several yards inside into the desert area. So it's, as I mentioned, they had melons. There were some people who think there might have been some kind of a cucumber-like structure, but I mean, most of the verification that we have are things like pollen grains and things like that. But if you go to Egypt now, you're going to see these elaborate small trench irrigation things going on, and in many cases they were intercropping with the date palms and larger trees surrounding a similar area that shaded from the water from drying out. And they were constantly irrigating through that.
And now there is this movement for permaculture. So all different layers of agriculture from the ground to the treetops, and keeping them there interactively, permanently with channels. And it sounds like everything old is new again, that kind of thing.
And also the thing that's difficult to envision, the route of the Nile has changed. So for those who've been to Egypt, if you go to where the Sphinx is, and the temple to Khafre, the middle pyramid of the three large ones, that temple was right on the banks of the Nile. And in the 4,000 years since, the Nile has the Nile is flowing differently, and it's several miles away now. Yeah. And so what we see now may not have been the actual location where these were located, but we certainly can see similar activities. I've seen these weighted device that would actually go scoop up water, and you'd dump it in it, and they just keep doing that one after. But it was because of the amount of the weight of the water was balanced out by the weight counterweight, so it was easy to move. I think they call it shottifs or something like that. We see what the Archimedes wheel that actually rotates, and you'll have a cattle will be used as a force to sort of move around, and that would cause the thing to keep moving and shuttling water up from the Nile that we dumped into the trenches and just start flowing.
Yeah, I saw a couple of those big machines on the television, of course, but the next question is there a possibility that the Pabasa imagery could represent feeding the bees during death?
Feeding the bee, that's a novel one. The hieroglyph of a lot of bees is thought to mention a swarm. It's thought to be a swarm. That's pretty novel. That's pretty good. The one thing that's different about this time in the 6th dynasty, it's called the Sate period, S-A-I-T-E. The major seat of government, which was up in the Delta region, and the temple in Sate was named Herbet, and it means the house of the bee. And so the bee had a very different, the religious symbolism of the bee was extended up into the building of a temple up in the capital. So there may have been that may have been part of the part of all that sort of interlocking philosophy.
The next one asks what Neferhetep means, the actual word, Nefer-HETEP.
Nefer. Well, Nefer, I don't recall what the actual Nefer means beautiful, or good, but Nefer, and I'm not sure about Hetep. I don't recall the name. It's
I have no idea.
Too many words in my brain today.
The next person loves your bee pin, and I think you should tell the story.
Oh, this
other
pin
side.
here, the other side. It's reverse. This is not a bee pin. This is the Egyptian Fly of Valor. And the Fly of Valor is the Fly of Valor was an award given to tenacity in battle. I've seen the original ones that were done. They're about yay so big, and they're made of solid gold. This is on bronze, and it was given to as an award for soldiers. Thought to be an award for soldiers who showed tenacity in battle, being hit, knocked down, and they get back up, and they get wounded, they get back up, and they keep going back, like much like a soldier fly or a biting fly. You swat at it, it keeps coming back. You swat it, it keeps coming back. There are some other alternatives now that have been proposed, meaning that it might have had something to do with locations, because there's some, I've seen some paintings that have people wearing large flies, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it couldn't be the Fly of Valor, because that could have been an award given to those two individuals. Now, here's the shameless plug. The Fly of Valor lapel pin, along with a silver Egyptian hieroglyph pin, a scarab, the Dejid pillar, the Tiet, and so on. These were all made by my wife. I'm fortunate to have a wonderful wife who is extremely talented. She has a shop on Etsy that she sells these. As I say, it's a shameless plug, but I'm going to do it. And it's called, all one word, Silver Spot Studio. If you should go to silverspotstudio.com, it'll take you right to her shop, and you can see all of her amulets and some of her other jewelry. She's got things from ancient Greece in there and things like that. And she has another site called Silver Spot Metalworks on Etsy, but silverspotstudio.com, just write that in. It's all one word, no breaks. That'll take you right to her website. Her name is Jessie Smith, and she has been to Egypt with me. This will be our 5th trip together coming up. And she goes there and gets inspired and moves from there. I think she's got a wasp scepter now on there as well. There is the Egyptian rattle is on there. That's a real small, beautiful, small little structure like that. But a lot of people buy them as pendants, and some of her items are available as earrings and so on. But if you have a love of Egyptian, of fine craft and Egyptian amulets, you should check that out.
So we have a lot of things about the bees, and one of them is that they only depict 2 wings, not 4.
Yes.
So did they only have 2 wings, or is it just easier to draw 2 wings?
It's easier to draw 2 wings. In fact, in the book I talk about, they actually drew all these things. All look relatively similar because they drew them in a 2x2, essentially 2 squares at the top, 2 squares at the bottom, and the bee was centered in such a way with all things touching the edge of the box. So that's why they all look so similar. They were drawn to a grid pattern, but it's artistic license.
Okay, the other is they love your background and they want to know what it is.
This is the rotunda at the Old Egyptian Museum, which is still open today. It is some of these larger statues may have been moved or have been moved to the Grand Egyptian Museum, which is not fully open yet. But you can imagine when I first saw photographs of this as a kid, I had to go there, and I've fortunately been at this museum several times. But it is just a wonderful location with things like pyramid caps, the tops of very pyramids. This place has so much stuff, and it's not 1 or 2 things. You'll find a cabinet, for example, that will probably have several hundred scarab amulets in it. You can spend days there, and there is a YouTube video of somebody walking through the Old Egyptian Museum, and it's like 45 minutes. They may be one of the first floor and the second floor, but there are YouTube videos that sort of go sort of a long, slow walk. But this is an amazing place. The new museum that just opened up last couple of years ago, the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization, is sort of like a best of. It has some really good stuff from the Pharaonic age and prehistoric ages, but it also has some of the highlights of the Coptic Christians and the Islamic art, as well as modern art. And it's now where they have moved the royal mummies.
Now I have several with women and the honeycombs and the cylindrical hives and something on their heads.
Yes.
Wax cones on women's heads. How did they use and remove wet wax as it melted? They had to wear it to melt the wax.
No, these things, these I don't have a picture handy to show you, but there have been a paper was just published a couple of years ago an archaeological dig found a woman with one of these wax cones on top of her head. It was a cone-shaped structure. It's believed that the wax contained perfume. And you'll find several tombs, like the tomb of Ramos, for example. There's also a picture in the tomb of Nabam at the British Museum of women wearing these wax beeswax combs, and it was thought to it was a fashion symbol, but it also is probably impregnated with some kind of a fragrance, and that was a fashion that was quite common and seen in some of the, not only the tombs. And now last year, if they go to if they ask the Google about these cones, they can actually see photographs from the archaeological dig that found the remains of an individual with one of these on their head.
So this lady asks, how does the Mayan evidence inscriptions compare with the Egyptian artifacts?
Very different. Maya glyphs, if you've ever had a chance to see them, they are extremely complex. And so we're fortunate. When Bishop Landa went down to the Yucatan, he converted everybody to Catholicism and told them they should no longer worship the gods that they were worshiping. A lot of the people continued, and so there was a concerted effort to destroy all the Mayan texts or books. 5 survive. Fifth one was just found a few years ago, not a complete one, but parts of one. And one of those 5, the Madrid Codex, has 10 pages on beekeeping. Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah.
and in there, you can find the honeybee glyph quite often. It's very strange. It's sort of a little square with an eye and a structure coming underneath it, and then another little dark structure here. And they use it in combination with in this particular example, there are 2 feast days. A feast day for when the flowers start to bloom to give the nectar for the bees to work, and another feast day when they start harvesting the honey, and so on. And their honeycombs, so their beehives were also horizontal. They weren't very big. They're about yay so big, but they were logs that were hollowed out. They plugged each end with what they're called panuchos, and there was a hole drawn on the side, and it was hung outside their huts. And the thing about Maya bees is they are stingless bees. They're a different, they're in the same family, but they're a different genus than our honeybee. And so they produce very little honey. But what's interesting about their group is they have a honeycomb that looks much like our honeycomb, but they don't put honey in there. Is used just for rearing the young. They would make a sort of communal honey pot, usually about that big in diameter, about that tall, and all the workers flying back in would deposit their nectar in that structure.
Wow.
And they're really cute. There's always a guard bee at their opening, and you'll see her when a bee's coming in, she'll step out of the way and the bee flies in. She'll be looking out the door, out the entrance, and she'll look up and a bee flies out. And it's just amazing. If you go to Merida or any of the areas, especially in the Yucatan, you can. There are some places that actually have traditional Maya beekeeping going on, and it is just fascinating to watch. But the neat thing is that they're stingless bees. They don't have a stinger.
Wow.
And so you might remember the days of Saturday Night Live with the killer bees.
Yes.
The killer bees, that whole idea occurred back in 1957, I believe it was. A beekeeper by the name of Kerr brought over some African bees. His hope was that he could develop some bees that would be able to tolerate the heat in northern South America. And they were brought over, and they put on queen excluders on the entrance, so the queen couldn't fly out and they couldn't swarm. Unfortunately, the researcher's assistant didn't know that, and he removed all these entrance blockers.
There's always some helpful person.
And they swarmed. And of course, they were called killer bees because when you'd see bees in a tree, you'd just climb up there and steal the honey. Well, it turns out African bees, they live in very small colonies, and they're extremely aggressive because the the competition for the honey is so intense. They're very aggressive, and you could be stung maybe 500 times in 30 seconds. And so starting after 57, we had, and as the bees then expanded, they killed more and more people.
Wow.
Now
Right.
people are aware of it, so that I think the last person to be killed in the United States was about maybe 10 years ago or so. It was in Arizona. They made their way all the way now into southern Arizona and what have you. And it was a couple that had a shed out in their backyard where they kept their lawnmowers and things like that. And they didn't notice there was a wild colony of Africanized bees. And so as the husband went in to get equipment, the bees got upset and started swarming and stinging. And when a honeybee stings, it leaves a pheromone that tells other bees, sting here.
Yeah.
And so he went into a coma. He was covered because the dosage is based on body weight. It's LD50. His wife unfortunately passed away from all the bee stings, but that was the last time that's happened.
Well, we're going to end this on a happier note.
That's good.
They want you to write a children's book about bees and the bees of Egypt. I just thought I'd let you know because it's such an interesting thing, and kids are fascinated with the group dynamics of bees for sure. But I thought I'd tell you that,
well, thank
they
you.
like you enough to think that you ought to also write a children's book because we'd like to get more kids interested in doing things for nature.
Oh, I totally agree with that. Yes, I do have a colleague that wrote a wonderful children's book on cicadas, and I might mention that there maybe collaborate with them on this as well. But
Super.
So,
Super.
but thanks
Well,
for the
I'm
idea.
going to stop there. You've had a whole bunch of questions, let me tell you, and I tried to consolidate a bunch of them, but they've been poking me to get done.